listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
I wanna see the light.
Thank you for letting us be part of your day. My name is Jerry Mitchell. Sitting beside me is the lovely Myra.
Hi, everyone.
And, a little confession. Because as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about in this episode, what I was going to address, what I was going to avoid, I realized that this podcast was already kind of laid out in front of me. Now, here's our confession, okay? Are you ready for this? While we're recording this, it is actually the evening before we're going to release it. We're not actually, we're live when we're recording this, but it won't be live
Till tomorrow.
Tomorrow when we release it. But you're still welcome to chat, to chime in on the chat. I will get those notifications. The reason we're not going to be live tomorrow is that Myra actually, at the same time that we will usually be live, you're going to be reporting for jury duty.
I am.
Yes, you are. And that gives us a chance to talk about a lot of things that people have asked me over the years that kind of go along this same line. People ask me not a lot about jury duty, but they do ask, should I, as a believer, try to get out of jury duty? And we're going to talk about that. Well, a big one that comes up every couple of years is, should I vote? Now, I understand when you don't like either or any of the candidates that are running, and you compare, the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. I understand that. How about one that a lot of people don't think about, but I have actually had somebody ask me this. They wanted to start a business. And it's like, I don't know if I should, because that means I'm going to have a business license. And if I have to have a business license, that means I'm dealing with the government. Well, yeah, you are. How about that? And they say, well, if I have to deal with the government, that means I have to deal with the IRS, and I have to deal with the state tax people, and I have to deal with the county tax people, and yada, yada, yada. Well, yeah, how about that? Had somebody say, I was thinking seriously about putting addition on our home, but I don't want to go get the variance that I need from the county, because it would be what they wanted. They would actually have to have a variance, which means they have to appear before the county council where we live. They didn't want to even go to a county council meeting to add on to a home for themselves. What these people are actually asking is, should believers be involved with civil government, civil rule, or civil politics? Now, the answer in the United States is you are already involved in civil government. If you have a driver's license,
right?
If you have a job, you're paying taxes, you have a social security number. In the United States, if you get married, believe it or not, you have to have a license in the United States you have to have a marriage license in the United States to get married. A lot of countries don't do that. They leave it up to the churches still, which is the way it should be, legislatures. If you have a child, you're involved in civil government.
Yes.
You don't have a choice, because in the United States, that child must, when they turn a certain age, attend a school. Now, it can be a public school, it can be a private school, you can be homeschooled, but you still have to approach the civil authorities to say our child's going to this school or that school, or we're going to homeschool, right?
Right.
So you're already involved. You don't get off that easy, okay? Just because you want to get out of something, because you don't want to do something, you don't get off that easy. Now, there are some countries around the world where believers are not even allowed to speak in public. They are completely removed from being directly involved in changing the laws that govern them. Think about that. I can't, as a believer in certain nations, I can't go to even my local community meetings and speak out because I'm persona non grata there as a believer, right? How about that? Think about this. Think about this. They can't do it publicly, but they still can influence their local officials and the people around them, right? If you can't let your light shine directly, the one thing you don't want to do is cover it up until it's extinguished. If you take a candle, have you ever seen, what do they call those things, a candle snuffer?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they call them? That's the real name for them?
Yes.
Because that's what I always called it. I didn't know what it was called. The things that you push over a candle, you cover that candle up, and it will extinguish that candle. That's what can happen to you if you don't let your light shine. Why am I comparing these two things like this? Well, think about that. If you punch a couple of holes in that candle snuffer, it defeats the purpose of it, right?
Right.
Because now light can get out and oxygen can get in.
Right.
And that's what keeps the flame going, right? What's all that have to do with what we're going to talk about today? People who ask me the questions I mentioned earlier often say, well, we're called to be set apart. We are different than the world. We don't get caught up in the politics. We don't get caught up in the drama of the world. What does it mean to be set apart biblically? Well, it means to live according to the Creator's instructions, to live the way He designed you to live, right? Can you do this in a place that might choose to persecute you for doing that? Well, yeah, you can. I've mentioned before, there are people living in a certain area where they are not allowed to express their faith in any way. And they've been offered an opportunity to move, but they stay right there because they are so influential that they have actually converted what used to be known as ISIS fighters to believers. Okay? They are not allowed to speak publicly. They can't do anything. They have no authority. They're consistently persecuted, and yet they won't leave because they know that they're doing something worthwhile. I was asked one time, where in the Bible does it say we have to vote? Somebody asked me that question. Actually, I've had 5 or 6 people ask me that question now. I lose track. Because sometimes the same people ask me the same questions over and over, hoping I'm going to give them a different answer, and I don't, and they finally get tired of it. Well, the answer is, you're not going to find that in the Bible. It also doesn't tell us that we must hold a political office. For that fact, nowhere in the Bible does it say that you shall send your child to a government school or that you're going to have a driver's license or a marriage license, right?
Right.
That's not like the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th commandment, okay? But the same people who think we shouldn't vote if we're able to, or go to a school board meeting or a town meeting, well, they're perfectly okay with going and getting a driver's license. They're perfectly okay with registering a car or accepting an occupancy permit for the house that they live in. You know, when you purchase a house, when you purchase a house that you're going to live in, one of the things that they give you is an occupancy permit, at least in the place we live. They might not in other places, but that's one of the things you get. It's a permit that says this house has been inspected. This house is considered safe for occupancy. You can live there. You have, even though you own it, you need somebody from the government to give you permission to live in it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't think that makes sense at all. I think it's stupid. I think that if I own it, I should be able to live in it. It doesn't matter if it's, a concrete bunker, a mansion, or whatever it might be. I shouldn't need the government's permission to live in something I own. Now, there are many examples in the Bible of people who were involved with their civil government. We look back, and if you go to Genesis, there's this fellow named Joseph. And he actually was deeply involved. He played just about every role of civil employee there was, right? Believe it or not, being a slave was where he started out. That is a role in the civil government of Egypt. Now, you might not think of the government of Egypt being under Pharaoh as a civil government, but it absolutely was. Joseph went from there to prisoner. Now, being a prisoner in Egypt, he was at first a slave, which gave him basically Egyptian citizenship, and then he was a prisoner. So, as an Egyptian prisoner, they had to treat him a certain way, and he worked his way up until he was like head prisoner, if I can use that designation for him. And of course, he went on to eventually become second in charge of Egypt, answering only to Pharaoh. There's another person though that we often overlook when we're searching for examples of people who remained faithful to the Almighty, even when they were being persecuted. And I'm not going to Job this time, okay? We're going to look at Daniel and his companions. Daniel was an interesting person. There's a lot of things you might not know about Daniel. And as Myra's going to read, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is from the King James, so there's some hard stuff to pronounce in here. So if you need help, let me know. But Daniel 1, 3 through 6.
And the king Nebuchadnezzar spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Excuse me. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank. So nourishing them 3 years, at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Okay. Yeah, I know that. They couldn't have easy names like Frank and Fred. They have to have fun names.
Well, to them that was Frank and Fred.
Yeah, I know. Well, did you catch Daniel and his 3 friends? Some of you might know them better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah. That's what you just read was their Hebrew names. They get changed later to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Wasn't that something? That's how that worked. Daniel wasn't named, didn't keep his Hebrew name either. He was Belshazzar. So as you look at these things, you really have to discern what's going on here. But under the control of Ashpenaz, and did you catch what he was? He was the keeper of the eunuchs. Daniel had already been punished and persecuted quite a bit by the time he was taken into exile in Babylon, right? I'm going to throw this out there. Apparently Nebuchadnezzar had learned an important lesson from the Egyptians. Nebuchadnezzar said, we're not going to drown the Hebrew children like the Egyptians did. We're just going to prevent the males from being able to have any more children. He was Ashpenaz was the keeper of the eunuchs. Daniel was a eunuch, and so was his three compadres. They were instructed to learn the ways of the Babylonians, of the Chaldeans. Now, of course, Daniel and his friends, one of the first things we learn is that they wouldn't eat the meat and drink the wine that the king had offered because it wasn't considered food by Daniel. And what Daniel considered food would have been the Leviticus 11 laws that deal with what he could and could not eat. But he didn't make a big deal of it. He didn't say a whole lot. We're not, he didn't stand up. You go to a restaurant today, and we hear things, and it's kind of funny. I can't remember which place it was. The lady at a table across from us, the waiter came over and she said, I can only eat vegan. Can you accommodate that here? Making a scene like, okay, just order vegetables, right? Wouldn't that be the simple thing to do? But she made a big deal of it. Daniel and his companions didn't. They simply told Ashpenaz, we don't eat this. I'll tell you what, you just feed us vegetables, let us drink water. 10 days, you see how we fare. And if we're doing good like that, right? If we're doing good, you just let us keep doing that. We'll be okay. Now, Daniel didn't make a big deal. Like I said, he just said, here, we don't do this. It's offensive to us. Maybe he said that. We're not told exactly what the words he used were. But he just simply made a statement. Check us out in 10 days. You brought us here. Let us eat what we want. Check us out in 10 days. See how it goes. Right? And that's what happened. Now, Daniel, depending on how you count, Daniel served under at least 4 kings. That's 4 different civil governments. 4 different civil governments. Do you think Daniel, now he wound up being governor under 4 kings. He ruled quite a bit. He was actually in charge of the Chaldean astronomers for a period of time. And he became quite wealthy. Now, he had some trouble along the way, right? He decided that prayer was going to play an important role in his life. So when the king said, if anybody in my kingdom is going to pray, they're going to pray to me, right? Well, Daniel was audacious enough, I guess is the right word. He goes into his room, closes the door, but he opens a window. Why does he open a window to pray? because he's not making a silent prayer. Somebody heard him. Daniel was wise enough to know that prayer is a release of our spirit, and it goes up and is heard in heaven. He knew that. And it was overheard. And of course, he wound up in the lion's den. And the lesson that we should tell our children is not that Daniel was faithful and God closed the mouth of the lions. The lesson that we should be telling our kids is that Daniel opened a window and prayed out loud in an area where he probably shouldn't have. And the king didn't have a choice but to attempt to execute him. Now, it didn't work, and we know the rest of the story is that the king said, Daniel, your God now, nobody can speak against your God. See, the kings learned an important lesson from the Pharaoh in Egypt. A very important lesson from the Pharaoh in Egypt. For those who think they're set apart, are you actually set apart, or are you hiding? Or worse, are you allowing your arrogance to rule over you? I will have nothing to do with that form of government. I will have nothing to do with voting. I will have nothing to do with this or that or anything else. Daniel couldn't vote, couldn't have children, but he found a way to be influential, didn't he? He found a way to work in that civil government. And what happened? The king decreed that no one was allowed to speak against the God of Daniel. But there's another lesson in Daniel that we really want to look at, and this has some consequences. In Daniel chapter 3, verses 8 through 26, I don't know if there's any hard names in there or not. There shouldn't be.
Then some Babylonians came up to the king. They began speaking against the men of Judah. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Our king, live forever. Our king, you gave a command. You said that everyone would hear the horns, the lyres, the zithers, harps, pipes, and all the other musical instruments. Then they would have to bow down and worship the gold statue. Anyone who wouldn't do this was to be thrown into a blazing furnace. Our king, there are some men of Judah who did not pay attention to your order. You made them important officers in the area of Babylon. Their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They do not serve your gods. They do not worship the gold statue you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar became very angry. He called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So those men were brought to the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is it true that you do not serve my gods? And is it true that you do not worship the gold statue I have set up? Now you will hear the sound of the horns, the flutes, the lyres, the zithers, harps, pipes, and all the other musical instruments. And you must be ready to bow down and worship the statue I made. That will be good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown quickly into the blazing furnace. Then no God will be able to save you from my power." Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king. They said, "Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves to you. You can throw us in the blazing furnace. The God we serve is able to save us from the furnace in your power. If he does this, it is good. But even if God does not save us, we want you, our king, to know this. We will not serve your gods. We will not worship the gold statue you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king told the soldiers to throw them into the blazing furnace. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were tied up and thrown into the blazing furnace. They were still wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes. The king was very angry when he gave the command, and the furnace was made very hot. The fire was so hot that the flames killed the strong soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego there. Firmly tied, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was very surprised and jumped to his feet. He asked the men who advised him, "Didn't we tie up only 3 men? Didn't we throw them into the fire?" They answered, "Yes, our king." The king said, "Look, I see 4 men. They are walking around in the fire. They are not tied up, and they are not burned. The 4th man looks like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar went to the opening of the blazing furnace. He shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out! Servants of the Lord Most High God, come here."
Okay. Were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego involved in a civil government? Absolutely. The king himself had appointed them. And, they basically stood up to the king and said, "We're not bowing down to your statue. That's not who we are. You let us eat what we wanted to eat. We've been doing a good job. You want to throw us in the fire, you go right ahead. That, you're the king. You can do that. No worries, no problems." But, if the God that we serve has a desire to, he won't let anything happen to us. And that's exactly what happened. They were accused and condemned by man for breaking man's law. Their punishment to be thrown into the fiery furnace, it was made extra hot just for them. But what happened? They had been obedient to the Creator. They were saved. And it's interesting what they said. Our God will save us. How about that? Now, I'm going to draw just a little bit of a parallel here between the fiery furnace and the lake of fire that we find in the book of Revelation. And for our Jewish listeners, you've already read this story. It's here in Daniel, okay? But in Revelation, it's considered the lake of fire at the final judgment. And it's basically the same thing. You can be saved from that lake of fire if you are not so arrogant as, a lot of Christians like to say, "Well, I have faith in Jesus. That's all I need." And I would suggest today, Christians, you go read Revelation entirely. The whole thing. It's not that hard to figure out. If I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. Especially pay attention to chapter 14, verse 12, where it says, "Here is the patience of the saints." This is the definition of a saint, okay? "Here are they that keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus." That's what it says in English. The definition of a saint is someone who hears and obeys the Almighty. In other words, they follow His instructions. And here's where things get interesting. They have the faith that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had. Because what is the name of Jesus in Hebrew? Yeshua. What does that mean? Yah is our salvation. Yehovah is our salvation. If you don't believe it, Go read Isaiah 12:2. Now, do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego understood who was going to be able to save them? Absolutely, they did. They trusted him and him alone. And there's a lot more lessons just like this in the Bible. What we learn from Daniel and his friends is that being part of a civil government is allowed, especially when it gives you a chance to glorify the Creator, especially when you have the opportunity to do exactly what Daniel and his friends did. When you have the opportunity to do what Joseph did. When you have the opportunity to be in front of not just kings, but anyone, prisoners, guards, mayors, magistrates, take your pick. The guy next door, the gal next door, the people who come to pick up your trash, the people who else is involved in civil government? Anybody. You have that opportunity. Now, I know a lot of Christians who stand among believers and say, well, I'll never be like Peter. I will never deny the Almighty. But when they're away from that particular crowd, they hide. And I think they hope that they are never given the choice to deny or be tried and possibly executed. If you have a chance, go vote. Folks living in other countries, some of the people who listen to this wish they had the opportunity to go vote. Some of the folks that listen to this podcast, really wish they had the opportunity to be free enough to live the way they are designed to live. Don't worry about party or platform or candidate. If you don't like either candidate, vote for the party platform that represents your beliefs. Hopefully, it's kind of easy to do that in the United States right now. And in fact, it has actually, there's so much controversy over this right now that the Catholic Church as a whole is involved. And they are threatening to withhold communion from certain politicians who choose to kill babies. Now, communion to the Roman Catholic folks is an important sacrament of their doctrine. And to have that withheld from you means that you've done something wrong in the eyes of the church. And hopefully, the church is strong enough and able to withstand the scrutiny and actually enforce this. In other countries, you're going to need to examine the person or the party and what they stand for. Don't want to serve on a jury? Too bad. You know what? If Daniel and his friends can do what they did, you can go serve on a jury. If Daniel and his friends did what they did, you can go vote. If Daniel and his friends did what they did, you can go get your driver's license. You can go get your marriage license. You can go do the things that you need to do to live in this world as a citizen of the nation that you live in. Stop using the Bible as a crutch. It's not a crutch or an excuse. An excuse is nothing more than a reason for failure, and the Bible does not fail. Stop hiding behind that non-existent veil of religious doctrine, especially when the Bible doesn't support it. Especially when the Bible doesn't support what you believe. It is the responsibility of every believer to spread the influence and the glory of the Almighty wherever they have the opportunity to. And you can do it when you walk into a courtroom as a juror. You can do it when you walk into a polling place as a voter. You can do it when you walk into the Department of Motor Vehicles to get your driver's license. Right?
Right.
So, did you have anything to add to that?
Go vote and go be a juror.
That's right. But most importantly, go live the way you are designed to live. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you have... I know we have stepped on some toes, but I'm getting used to that. You should be too. You know, if you're listening to this, if you feel me dancing on your toes, maybe you should go to GiveGod90.com and start looking at what's there, turning your life around. Remember that repent for the kingdom of heaven is a hand thing? Yeah, might be a good idea. Until next time, Thursday we should be back live with you. And like I say, if you need to leave a message on chat, go ahead. I will get the notification. So until next time, many, many blessings.